Hi, this is John Bermuda Schwartz with the Weird Al Yankovic Band, and please, please don't encourage this.
Broadcasting just steps away from the world-famous Miami University campus in the heart of exotic, scenic Oxford, Ohio. You're listening to Don't Encourage This, a series of interviews and conversations with artists, creatives, interfaith voices, and close personal friends of Weird Al Yankovic. I am your socially awkward host, Marcel Von Bullock, and I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church USA. I am thrilled to welcome John Bermuda Schwartz as my guest on this episode of the podcast. For over 4 decades, John has been the drummer for Weird Al Yankovic. From the moment he first banged on Al's accordion case to add percussion to Another One Rides the Bus on the Dr. Demento Show, to celebrating their most recent album, Mandatory Fun, hitting #1 on the Billboard charts in 2014, John has been there for every single album Weird Al has ever recorded. John is not just a world-class drummer, he is also the band's official archivist and photographer, capturing thousands of behind-the-scenes moments throughout their incredible, legendary career in music and comedy. His latest book, Lights, Camera, Accordion, eye-popping photographs of Weird Al Yankovic 1981 through 2006, is a stunning 256-page visual retrospective featuring over 300 never-before-seen color photographs, complete with a foreword by Drew Carey and an afterword by Weird Al himself. John joins me this episode on the podcast to share some behind-the-scenes stories behind some of the more memorable photographs included in the book, some of which have never been seen even by Al's most diehard fans. John hits the road with Weird Al Yankovic this summer. The Bigger and Weirder tour kicks off next week at the Venetian Theater in Las Vegas. You can find tickets and tour dates at weirdal.com. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that during our conversation, John shares some wonderful memories of working with legendary music producer Rick Derringer on some of Weird Al's earlier albums. Rick Derringer sadly died on May 26, 2025. This conversation with John Bermuda Schwartz was recorded prior to Rick's death, and our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to his friends, colleagues, and loved ones. I'm thrilled to welcome John Bermuda Schwartz as a guest on this program. John was a semi-regular guest back on the old Cringe podcast back in the day. Some of you remember that, I know. He's been a longtime friend of the show. It's great to welcome him back. Friends, what are we waiting for? Let's do the thing. Let's welcome John Bermuda Schwartz to episode 10 of Don't Encourage This. John Bermuda Schwartz, thank you so much for being here. It's so good to see you again.
Well, thank you for having me back.
It's been a long time since you and I have had a chance to talk. You've been a longtime friend of the show. You were a semi-regular guest on the old Cringe podcast back in the day. Yeah, and I know a lot of our listeners have been wanting to know, how is Dr. Zayas, and have you seen him lately?
I saw him about a year and a half ago.
Oh, good.
And we did a show. We did Hanging with Dr. Z, and it's the only episode that has yet to air.
Really?
It's been a long time. I don't know what the hang-up is, but it was a pretty funny show, and it hasn't aired. There was there was a major twist going on in the show, which I can't really talk about.
Oh.
But I was playing in the band.
Yes.
And that was my deal. I mean, I posted that on Facebook, so that's not a big secret. But
sure.
Nobody has actually seen it. Puddle's Pity Party was on there.
We should probably explain. I don't mean to interrupt you, but for those listening who have no idea what in the world we're talking about, which may be like 99.9% of people listening, you've made appearances on a web comedy show, as you said, called Hanging with Dr. Z, which is a fictional 1960s style talk show hosted by the fictional Dr. Zayas from Planet of the Apes, which here is played by comedian Dana Gould. Is that right?
That's it.
And you've played with him a couple of times. Is that right?
Not on his show, but I was involved with the musical artist a couple of times.
Okay.
But I was only actually on the show once in the band that was playing. Al was a featured guest on the show. Now that episode is out there. All of this stuff is on YouTube except the one I'm on, which I thought was hilarious. And there was a great premise for that episode. And it's been like a year and a half, and I have no idea why it hasn't aired.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. I love Hanging with Dr. Z. I found it. I don't remember how I found it. Like you said, it's on YouTube. It's such a funny show. Dana Gould is such a great comedian. The show's a little bit of an anachronism. It's riffing on 1960s talk shows. If you enjoy that, it's really funny. Hopefully your episode will air soon. That's a shame that they haven't.
I hope so. I'll tell you, it was really, I was familiar with the show already. It was really fun. I was laughing the whole time. And it's obviously scripted to a point, but there were some things that were obviously ad-libbed, and Dana Gould is really good.
Yeah, he is.
It was hilarious. And I hope this episode comes out because it's great.
I hope so too. Well, you and I were chatting off mic for a few minutes. I want to just catch folks up since last time you and I spoke. You guys had a really big tour with Weird Al Yankovic, I think about 2 years ago. The unfortunate return of the ridiculously self-indulgent, ill-advised Vanity Tour. This marked the first time that Weird Al has ever played Carnegie Hall. Is that correct?
That's, which was a big deal for all of us, of course.
Yeah.
And there have been some really, really outstanding venues that we've been playing in the last few years, without the benefit of a new album, mind you.
Yeah.
But it's just the fan base is there, and we're playing venues that will accommodate those fans. And it's not that Carnegie Hall is a big giant place. It doesn't hold 10,000 people.
Sure.
But it's a very prestigious place. We played Radio City Music Hall. We've done some very cool venues, and we got some cool venues coming up. Again, without the benefit of any real new material, the venues just seem to be getting more and more prestigious, which is pretty cool.
Well, and I think that's a testament to the kind of comedy that you guys do. Weird Al just keeps attracting more and more young fans every generation. And so rather than your audience petering out or getting smaller, it just seems to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, our old fans have grown up with us, but we're still accumulating new fans. So yeah, the base is growing. It's a very wide demo. When we very first started, we had sort of a Monty Python, Three Stooges appeal. We appealed to like kind of adolescent males,
yes.
and that was sort of, that was via Dr. Demento, again, a very high school male oriented audience.
Yeah,
and that within about 8 or 10 years of when we started going in the early 80s, that had spread out, and it was very kind of mixed, very, the guys were bringing, if they discovered girls, they were now bringing their girlfriends, and it became a very mixed audience. And then as the years went on, a lot of those fans from the 80s still hang in there, and they're bringing their kids. There's 6-year-olds, there's 60-year-olds. It's just, and everything in between. And then on stage, older than 60. It's a very wide demo, and it's a very loyal audience, which is great. That's what keeps us going, and that's why we do it.
You and Al, I say you plural, Al, the band, all of you guys. What's brilliant about this kind of music is the parodies. Even if the parodies are parodies of songs that are older from decades past, the songs are still funny, even if you don't know the original song. And I think they just sort of perpetually appeal to young people, even if you didn't grow up with Achy Breaky Heart or whatever it is. They're always funny no matter what generation you happen to be in. And I think that's a credit to how Al writes them.
Well, hopefully. There are some things in his songs that are very dated.
Sure.
Which is just, that's the product of the timing of that song, and the pop culture and all that. And, it's all about the Pentiums. It's kids don't really know.
Like Y2K.
That Puff Daddy guy who's on trial. What's a Pentium? What's a Benjamin, for that matter?
What's a floppy disk?
Yeah, what's a floppy disk? Anyway, yeah, 5-inch or 8-inch.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's hard to imagine being able to top Carnegie Hall, but y'all have a huge tour coming up this coming summer that promises to be even bigger and weirder.
Oh, that's good. I like that. We're going to change all the posters.
See, you can just send the check my way, and
okay.
These ideas are freelance. No, the bigger and weirder tour featuring special guest Puddle's Pity Party. And you guys will be playing, among many wonderful venues, Madison Square Garden on July 12th, just 2 days after my birthday, Bermuda.
Oh, well, happy birthday. That's a pretty prestigious, that's a pretty cool place for a guy, with comedy songs and an accordion.
Yeah. And you guys aren't just playing, they have like a smaller theater inside it, and you guys are playing the Garden.
It's hard to say, we've sold out places that are bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a giant place, but and it kind of is, but it's very prestigious. I don't know, at this point how ticket sales are going. I hope, I know people are coming in from other states and probably other countries to see us there. just because that's such a cool place. And another cool place in LA on the other coast, our hometown gig, is the Forum.
Oh, nice.
Which is another similarly sized venue, like when they block off the back of the venue behind us.
Yes.
So that people don't have to look at our backsides. It still holds about 16,000 people. And that's a good size.
That's amazing.
That's another cool place we're playing. We're at Red Rocks again, and just outside of Denver.
Beautiful venue.
And have sold that out. We're playing some sheds. These are like outdoor theater type places. We've sold out 2 nights at Wolf Trap near DC.
Oh, cool.
And we played there before, which is a great venue out in the woods. And we're playing Pine Knob near Detroit. We're playing Blossom near Akron, Ohio. We're doing some places that we haven't played since we went out with the Monkees in 1987, and they were doing big places, and we went out and opened for them. So we got very early in our careers, and before we were ready to play in front of 7,500 people, I guess, we were playing in front of we were playing those kind of houses. The problem was that second year of touring for them wasn't quite as prosperous as the first year, and so they booked all these big places again, and we're not selling them out. We're going to play them on our own, almost 40 years later, and we're selling them out.
That's amazing.
So take that, Davey and Mickey and Peter and whoever's left. Mickey, I guess.
When you guys toured with the Monkees, didn't you have a notoriously infamous performance with them when, and I may be confusing this, but like the audience was like throwing stuff at you guys, like beer bottles, or was that touring with a different band?
Oh, we opened for Missing Persons.
That's it.
In 1982.
Yeah.
And no, their audience did not appreciate us at all. So they were they threw money, they threw coins. They had finished throwing their empty Coke cups and all this stuff, and they started throwing like money. And I went around to the stage. I picked up about $3 and quarters and dimes and pennies and nickels. The nickels hurt. The quarters hurt too because they're serrated on the edge. No, it was that was an infamous. Yeah, we should have got booed off the stage. They were booing, but we didn't leave. We did like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it was. And I've got an audio recording of that show. I recorded almost everything back in the day. You can hear them out there.
Oh my gosh.
My Bologna. And then, things hitting the mics and, that they're throwing. It's just, but we stayed up there and, wrote it out. And that's just the kind of pro that Al was.
Oh my gosh. Hopefully they've learned their lesson since then.
Yeah. And Missing Persons is not playing Carnegie Hall. So,
yeah.
Or Red Rocks or any of the venues we're playing. So there you go.
Take that, Missing Persons.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away any of the surprises that you guys have in store. These tours, as you kind of alluded to earlier, Al and the band, you guys are so good at just innovating these tours year after year after year. Every tour is inventive and innovative. And I was wondering, are there any little teasers that you could offer fans about the upcoming tour that they might expect from Bigger and Weirder?
Well, the bigger part, and one refers to some of the venues. Two refers that the band is now twice the size it was before. So we had the 4 of us behind Al. Now there's going to be 8 of us behind Al. So there's going to be more people on stage playing, singing. We actually got another guitar player finally after 40 years. So Jim doesn't have to, play 2 parts at once. We got a horn player, another wind player like sax and stuff like that. A lady that came out with us on the orchestral tour in 2019, Monique Donnelly, will be singing. Now, all of these 4 extra people, they can all play other instruments. They can all sing. I mean, I guess the horn players sing when they don't have a horn in their mouth. They can play percussion. So suddenly they can do sound effects. Suddenly we have a lot more live going on stage, not only, for the audio part of it, but visually it's a bigger show. I don't know that it's weirder because we're working really hard to make it great.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be terrible weird. It's going to be, I think he just wanted to get his name up there twice. Weird Al and Weirder, the weirder the better. So, but that's not really a secret. I think Al spilled the beans about, that we're having a bigger band.
Sure.
This time out. We're back to the full production show. So there'll be videos and costumes and stuff like that, which will be the costumes. I don't know if the new players are ready for that. But if they want to get paid, they're going to wear the costume.
So someone's going to get stuck with a cone bra.
Yeah. I should say wardrobe, not costume.
Yes,
sorry.
of course.
Wardrobe.
Of course.
Costume suggests that it's silly or something.
Yeah, no. This is a serious show for serious people.
Yeah, we don't want people to think, that coming out with weird hats and wigs and stuff is silly. It's wardrobe.
Well, okay, so you mentioned Monique Donnelly.
Monique will be out.
Now, she also sang on the Straight Outta Linwood album. Is that right?
Probably.
Unless she didn't.
Or she didn't. I don't know. She had recorded with us before.
Yeah.
And as had Lisa Popeil. Lisa was out on that tour. And Scotty Haskell, who's the daughter of conductor-arranger Jimmy Haskell. And she was out. So it was the three ladies saying backup, and we had the orchestra. And we were running videos and doing costumes. So it was a full production plus the orchestra plus some extra voices, which is important because I don't really sing. In fact, happily, anything that I sang that was melodic in the past or intended to be melodic was taken away from me on this tour. I'm yelling and saying things into the mic. I wouldn't call it singing, but anything that was intended to be melodic has been pulled from my plate, which is fine with me because I'm not a singer. I mean, I don't have a melodic agenda.
Sure.
I don't play a melodic instrument, so I don't have, I know when I don't hit the note, which is most of the time, but I mean, I can't just pick notes out of thin air. It's very hard for me to do that kind of stuff. So and after 40 plus years, Al figured that out and has taken that off my plate. So that's, thanks, Al. That was nice. Potentially we'll have like 6 or 7 people singing on stage behind Al.
That's incredible. That's so cool.
And at certain times. And again, there's times where I like shout and yell stuff into the mic.
Sure.
But singing, no, I wouldn't call it that.
Now, Lisa Popeil has also been a long time collaborator with Al, like on albums like, I think going back to like In 3D.
I think that's where we hooked up with her, and she sang on Mr. Popeil.
Yeah, appropriately enough.
Which was her father, the original Mr. Popeil. She sung on a lot of stuff with us before, but that was the first time ever that we had brought out additional personnel to travel with us. But again, she and Scotty will not be out on this tour. It's just going to be Monique. There's a guitar player. Her name is Peyton Veligan. She'll play guitar and sing, and I understand she can also play keyboards if need. Everyone can do other stuff on this tour.
That's so great.
The sax player who plays, I assume, clarinet and probably flute, winds, and also sings. That's Sheila Gonzalez. And she had been in one of the Zappa tribute bands, I think, Dweezil's band.
Oh, nice.
So she's highly capable. And then there's Probyn Gregory, Probyn Gregory, on trumpet, trombone, French horn. I think he's can play tuba. He'll play percussion. I think he can also play keyboards. And he had been with Brian Wilson's band.
No kidding.
Well, till he heads out with us anyway.
Yeah.
And he does a bunch of other stuff. But I mean, that's kind of his more notorious gig is with Brian Wilson, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, musical genius with the Beach Boys. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, since the last time you and I spoke, of course, Al also put out a film, Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, on the Roku channel. But I wanted to ask you about the soundtrack for that film, because you guys actually went back into the studio and recut some of Al's older songs, like a Surgeon, Amish Paradise. I think another one, Rides the Bus. And I wanted to ask you, I was curious, is there a reason why they didn't or they couldn't use the original tracks for the movie, or why they wanted to recut those? Well,
I think in some cases we recorded stuff to be a live performance.
Oh, okay.
So we perform these things as they would have been. So it wouldn't have been appropriate, for example, for Like a Surgeon to use the Like a Surgeon studio track while they're on stage trying to, pretend that they're playing it.
Sure.
So we actually recorded that as we had done it live, which is basically like the record. But I mean, we didn't try and make it, as perfect as the record. We played it live. And that was, and I think that was the case for most of the things. I think another one, Rides the Bus, was re-recorded because the original recording just wasn't sonically, it wasn't intended to be ever released. It wasn't intended to even be recorded. It was just a live on the air, and that was the extent of it. So, but I think in cases where we recorded something that was supposed to sound like the record was because technically we would get charged more. Sony would charge us a bunch of money to use those recordings. Those all belong to Sony, all of those master recordings.
I wondered if there was a publishing thing going on with it too. So.
Well, that's a question of the actual master track.
Right.
And using that is another level of payment. Now, there's still all sorts of other publishing stuff for doing the song, but we didn't have to pay. It was cheaper to pay all of us to re-record it than to pay to source the original tracks from the studio. And again, and in some cases, that wasn't what we needed. We needed a live version of this or that or whatever. So yes, we went in and re-recorded a whole bunch of other stuff, recorded a new song, which was played over the credits. That's the first new song that had been out in like 8 years or something. I mean, it'd been, actually, no, you know what? We had the Hamilton Polka came out.
That's right.
Whenever that was. And then Polkamania came out in 2024. So there've been, some singles, let's say, that have come out, but not really an album. I don't know if we release, one song every 4 years, maybe in 30 years we'll have an album.
Right. That's so funny. Well, I wanted to ask you about actually Another One Rides the Bus. I want to share a story because I bought the soundtrack for Weird the Al Yankovic story when it came out, like many Weird Al fans.
Oh, thank you.
Another One Rides the Bus, the original song. This is one of those Weird Al songs that it doesn't matter how old I get, that song always makes me laugh. I mean, all of Al's songs are funny, and some of them, make me grin and make me smile. I cannot get through Another One Rides the Bus without laughing. It's just so funny and so silly. And as you mentioned earlier, the original track was recorded live on the air, on the radio, on the Dr. Demento radio show on September 14th, 1980, if my memory's correct.
Which was also the day I met Al. So I met him and immediately began working with him.
Yes.
And haven't stopped. It's coming up on 45 years.
Which is highly unusual in the music industry for a band to have that kind of longevity.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other guys came in beginning of 82. And are still, Steve J and Jim West are still the guys.
Yeah.
Ruben is new. He showed up in 1991.
Yes. He's only been there like 30 years.
Yeah. If you want to count him, that's still longer than a lot of bands, that have either since broken up or have just devolved into playing, smaller places again and are maybe not recording new material.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's kind of incredible with I don't want to call us a novelty act, but I mean, we are regarded as a novelty comedy, whatever. That's really unusual for a non-mainstream act to have such longevity and to actually grow, to continue growing.
I think you guys are regarded as a bit more than just a novelty act at this point. You guys are highly celebrated in the music world and in the comedy world. Going back to Another One Rides the Bus for just a second. So because that song was recorded live on the air, when you listen to it, the original version, there are all these like funny, like quirky little audio things that you can hear. This is really getting into the weeds here. But like, for example, there's a few moments where Al's voice, because he's practically screaming into the microphone, you can hear it like distorts a little bit, or the sound engineer can't quite keep up with him or something. It's live on the radio. These things happen sometimes. And 9 times out of 10, the listeners don't even notice. But in my opinion, they actually make the song that much funnier. And so when you guys put the soundtrack out for the movie, I'm looking at the track list for the soundtrack and I think, oh my goodness, it's 40 years later. Al and the band, they've got all the state-of-the-art recording studio. We're going to get this clean, completely flawless, high-definition recording of Another One Rides the Bus. And then I listened to it and I discovered that Al actually recreates some of the mistakes from the original radio show in the new version. And I just thought that was so funny. I mean, it's a very high quality recording, but you can hear that he's put a few of those still in there. And I just that's something that only like super fans are going to pick up on, but I picked up on it and I just couldn't help but laugh. I love that about the track.
Well, that was for sure a song that was supposed to sound like the original.
Yeah.
Except, the quality would be better, but performance-wise it was supposed to be. So whereas when we recorded that on the Dr. Demento show, Al handed me his accordion case.
Yes.
And I beat on the accordion case. Well, that's been beaten. I used to take that on tour in the early days until I finally broke it. And I've been through a few others. Anyway, I haven't really used it live in a long time. I haven't used a case in a long time.
Yeah.
But I needed a case to bang on. So I went through and I have some hard shell drum cases, snare drum cases. And there was one particular case sounded really good and sounded very, very much like that original accordion case. So I brought that case in and we recorded that. And like I used to do on the road, I put all the toys and all the stuff inside the case and brought them into the studio that way.
There's like a horn and a rubber duck and a whoopee cushion and all this stuff.
There's a duck call. There's a siren whistle. There's a ratchet. There's a flexitone.
I love it so much.
There's like a siren whistle. There's probably some other junk too.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the goal was to recreate that pretty faithfully.
Yeah.
And, with the exception of me not using the original case, which probably doesn't sound like it did back then anymore now that it's beaten in.
Sure.
But again, we didn't try to turn it into the Queen's rhythm track with Al singing. If we were to have recorded that couple of years later, it would have sounded like Queen.
Yeah.
With Al's lyrics on it. And maybe wouldn't have been as quaint, certainly wouldn't have been as spontaneous. Like My Bologna, when we recorded My Bologna, we weren't thinking of trying to recreate the sound very much of the original band, which is why we didn't play that like the Knack. So if we do that song again, we're going to play it like we did on the first album. We're not going to try and make it sound like the Knack playing, with different lyrics. I mean, because that's not what it was.
Well, and this is a really interesting point, because the first album you guys did together, which is just self-titled Weird Al Yankovic, I love that album. It's so funny, but you're right. It's like sonically, it's different from almost any of the other albums, and that there's so much emphasis on the accordion, and it sounds a little bit like One Take Wednesday. And I used to just assume that was because, you guys were young. It's a first album. You probably didn't have a lot of studio time. You just got to crank this out. But I think you also raise a really good point. In Al's early days, that was kind of the shtick. It wasn't so much about recreating the original production at first. It was about, isn't it hilarious that we're honking out My Sharona on the accordion, and there's something kind of funny about that.
Right.
And it sounds like that was kind of intentional.
Well, I don't know if it was as intentional as that it hadn't really occurred to him to do it any other way.
Okay.
I mean, it was just, he's the accordion player. It's his album. These are his lyrics. That's how he played. That's how he wrote the songs, the originals, for example. That's how he played the parodies, was on the accordion. I mean, there wasn't really a thought about doing it any other way. Yeah, I mean, you want to play the parts. You want to have Stop Dragging My Car Around. You want to have guitar in there. You want to do, but it didn't have to, but there's accordion going through the whole thing. That wasn't on the Stevie Nicks song. But by the second album, that turned around really fast, and it might have been at the suggestion of Rick Derringer, producer.
Oh, okay.
He says, why don't we go for the sound of the originals that you're parodying and kind of, help sell it better that way. The beginning of Eat It comes on, and you don't know if it's Eat It or Beat It until the lyric starts. Well, back in those days, we weren't quite, we didn't sound quite like Michael Jackson. We got much better at nailing the production and the sounds.
It sounded pretty close.
It was not bad. It was okay at the time. We got much better.
Sure.
We got really, an album to album. Each album was better as far as sound design and the parts being more accurate, the mixes being better. We got really good. I think the last album was, for a lot of reasons, was our best album.
Now, this is Mandatory Fun, which came out in 2014.
Mandatory Fun, summer of 2014. So it's been 11 years.
Yeah.
It was a number one album. Number one on the Billboard 200 charts.
We should say not number one on like the comedy charts, number one on Billboard.
Like mainstream. Yeah. Like a real number one. That's pretty cool. And we've had top 10 albums before, but never number one. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's a given that we were always at the top of the comedy chart, and that's cute and all that. But like to be on the real chart was a pretty cool deal.
It's quite a mic drop for a last album per se.
Oh yeah, no, we did. Number one album. Fine, see you, Sony. Goodbye. That's I actually. Al was already. We knew that would be the last album under the then contract, and Al had already decided that there wasn't really a reason to move forward with them. That what product wasn't selling, and there was no reason for them to have to facilitate anything. There was Al could do that. Al could get his stuff on YouTube and on Apple Music and on his own. He didn't need Sony. But sonically, that album was really, we all did just great work on that. And sound-wise, those songs really sounded. Those parodies really sounded like the original songs that we were copying. I mean, if you took all the vocals out, you would have a very difficult time telling one from the other.
Well, and apropos to what you're saying here, again, I'm gonna get really white and nerdy here, but you guys put out a box set a number of years ago called Squeeze Box, where basically the whole discography was remastered. They went back and remastered basically every album. I got this box set because I love you guys. And I remember going back and listening album by album to the remastered versions. And you can tell with some of the earlier albums, they really, really benefited from the remastering. But as you got closer and closer to the present day, you can tell the engineers really didn't have to do quite as much because you guys had gotten better and better and better. And by the time you get to Mandatory Fun, maybe they tweaked it a bit, but it sounded pretty close to what because you guys nailed it the first time, at least to my ears, it sounded like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. We all got better as the albums went on. I would say maybe a turning point was by the early '90s. With Off the Deep End, and then from that we really started moving forward on that. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were chasing songs, we were parodying songs that had very high production value. There was a lot of sequencing, a lot of sound design, a lot of programmed drum parts that weren't even real drums. I mean, there was a lot going on, and all of us had to like step up our game to reproduce those kind of things. And I wanted to do that so that Al didn't call in a real pro and have him do the stuff instead.
Come on now.
I always wanted to be responsible for the drums that were on there, whether I was playing live drums or whether I was programming the drums.
Of course.
So everything you hear on every album is all me, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And all those sounds are all sounds that I, in some cases, I was able to sample some sounds, but in probably, 4 out of 5 times I had to create sounds. I had to reproduce those sounds just out of thin air. With every album, I got better at it.
Yeah.
The more we did it, the better I got. It takes really good listening skills. It's not something I could have done really in the '80s. I didn't have that in me at that time.
Sure.
Even though I started programming '85, I started programming stuff with Al. It wasn't really. It was drum machines. They were just.
Wait, in '85, you said that was really cutting edge at the time.
Well, for us, it was. I mean, programmed drums had kind of been the vogue for about 5 years at that point.
Okay.
And a lot of mainstream artists were using that. Prince was already well underway and, using a Linn drum for stuff. But that was our first foray really into programmed drums on things. It became more and more prevalent until eventually, well, again, with Mandatory Fun, none of the parodies have live drums on them. They are all programmed.
I didn't know that. There's no live drums on Mandatory Fun?
Not on the parodies, no.
Really?
On the originals, yes.
Well, this is 2014, so a lot of the songs on the radio probably didn't have a lot of live drums either.
No,
so
exactly, and we do what the original song, and we don't try and change it up, with the exception of the very first album. But whatever the song is about, we need to recreate that. Yeah, and like I say, I mean, I think the ultimate in that was Mandatory Fun of really nailing the sounds and the production of the originals that we were chasing.
And that early 90s period that you were talking about, where you said you kind of identified that as a pivot moment. So like around Off the Deep End, Alapalooza, that's also right about the time I think that Al was starting to produce the albums himself as opposed to Rick Derringer or other folks like that. And I think, you can sort of hear, I mean, all the albums are great. They're all incredible. But I think that is a point where, as a listener, you can start to hear the real voice of Al and you guys in the band really coming into that. Sort of sets the template moving forward, I think.
Well, Al was always kind of in charge and sort of, but he let Rick on those first 6 albums, the first album through UHF in 1989. He let Rick be the role of the producer and that was kind of it. And not that Rick didn't know what he was doing. He certainly did.
He's a legendary producer.
Yeah. But when Al stepped in, now he was absolutely, and he's very meticulous. Yeah. He knows what he wants. He knows when he hears it, when he's got it. And he really pulled more out of us and made us, I don't want to say do it right, but do it to a higher level.
Sure.
And that increased with every album. And his production skills got better. Yeah. As well. The better he got, the better we got, the better we got, the better he got. And we all grew together. And we're doing things that back in the early 80s, we could not have conceived. Yeah. I couldn't have conceived of making up drum parts on a computer. I didn't even have a computer. So in 1983. So,
Oh, that's amazing. I wanted to ask you, speaking of drum sounds, I wanted to ask you a technical drumming question. And I'm not a drummer, so I don't know anything about this stuff, but I always find it very interesting to learn about this stuff. Now, you've been, as a drummer, very inspired by musicians like Ringo Starr and Hal Blaine. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're probably my 2 favorite drummers, although, I have several dozen. There's, Ringo and Hal Blaine are certainly at the top of my list. I liked a lot of other pop drummers. I liked some of the more technical drummers. Terry Bozzio is one of my favorite drummers.
Yeah.
So again, there's that missing persons connection. But I was a big fan of Frank Zappa. So I loved all of his drummers, Vinnie Colaiuta, Ralph Humphrey, and Chester Thompson, and Chad Wackerman, and Terry Bozzio, of course, was in there. But Hal and Ringo are probably at the top of my list because they're mostly what I heard in the 60s when I was growing up and learning to play drums. I mean, of course, the Rolling Stones had their own drummer and stuff, but a lot of the songs on pop radio, a lot of that stuff was Hal Blaine.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I was listening to Hal, but, I liked the Beatles. I liked the Mamas and Papas. That's Hal Blaine. I liked, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Hal Blaine. The Association, Hal Blaine.
John Denver.
All of this stuff, well into the 70s. So Hal is probably one of my heroes, and I'm very proud to have called him a friend. We were more than acquaintances. I've been out to his house. He's been to my house. We've gone out and had lunch, and he made me buy, but it's okay. And no, Hal was a sweetheart. And he passed away. It was just 5 years ago. At age 90, he had just turned 90, and about a month later he passed. And he was a great guy and a great drummer, and always played, whether it was with the Byrds or whoever, always played exactly. You can't conceive of, even 60 years later, you cannot conceive of a more appropriate part than what Hal did. And the same goes for Ringo. You cannot make those parts better. And it's not, well, you're just used to what it is. It's like, no, we have all sorts of opportunities to take things, in different directions and to, modify parts and change styles. And it's never an improvement. It's always, that was the exact right thing. And
100%.
And if he had done anything different, it wouldn't have been right.
Yeah.
And which is why they got rid of their first guy, Pete Best. He didn't do the stuff that John and Paul heard in their heads, and Ringo did.
Yeah.
So I still go by the two rules, WWRD and WWHD. What would Ringo do, and what would Hal do?
Yeah.
And between the two of them, I can do like 90% of whatever I'm called to do. If I have to make up a part on something, I can pretty much go back to the concepts that they employed. And get away with it, and be proud of the parts, and not just, not be lazy. It's not copying someone's part. It's not lazy. Making something up out of thin air is lazy, but actually listening to and copying what someone does requires work.
Oh, what could be more meticulous?
Right. It's like you're copying these songs, and Al's changing the lyrics, and you don't have to write any music or arrangements. All you have to do is just play parts. I said, no, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, it's like, why don't you go try it, pal? See how it turns out.
Yeah, well, and that's why you got Weird Al is Weird Al for 45 years, and he's the guy. Like Spike Jones was the guy, and then the Smothers Brothers, and Al. You only had one at a time, and Al's been the guy since 1983. And
he's still the guy,
and is still the guy. So when he goes, maybe there'll be someone else. I don't know.
I don't know about that. My partner Whitney got me into vinyl records a number of years ago, and I found this used John Denver record at a record store. It was an old live album that my dad and I used to listen to, and I was putting on the turntable, and it was just beautiful. I mean, it's such a beautiful album, and I think I posted something about it on Facebook, and I think you had I can't remember if you left me a comment or sent me an email or something saying that that's Hal playing on that live show, and that sort of pinged him on my radar as someone that I know you very much respect and take inspiration from.
Well, there's another thing about, and I believe that's the live album. Well, Hal had gone through some divorces and stuff, and over time, and had to sell all of his gold albums.
Oh no!
This was back in the like early 90s.
Okay.
And sold, consigned them, I think, through, there was a Rockaway Records here in LA, and then there was also one in Phoenix, or actually Mesa, I think, next to Phoenix. And they were, one brother ran the one place. Anyway, between those two places, I think all of his gold records wound up there, and he either got a commission when they sold, or they bought them from him, or whatever it was. Anyway, when I found out that it happened, that he had let all of his stuff go, I had told my wife, it'd be really cool if drummers would go out and go buy these albums and then give them back to Hal.
Oh, that would, yeah.
And I just sort of left it at that. And then the following Christmas, I get a present, and it's this big flat box, and I open it up. It's a Hal Blaine gold record for that John Denver live album.
No kidding. Was it really?
And it's a Hal. And I said, wow, this is cool. What's this? She says, that's for you to give to Hal.
Oh, John.
Thought, that's So sweet. So I kept it for a little while. Anyway, I did eventually, actually the following summer, we had Hal out for dinner and then brought him back to the house, and I brought the album out and handed it to him. That's the only gold album that ever went back into his possession.
Oh my gosh.
And this was in 1996 or somewhere around then, 95, something, 94. And that's the only album that ever came back into his possession.
Oh,
so I was
wow.
at his house, it's 6-7 years ago, and he has a bunch of different stuff on the wall, but only one real gold album, and it was that one I gave him. And he made up a little plaque given to me by John Schwartz, and that was very touching for him to get that back. I don't know where that is now, that he's passed. He had relatives. I know his nephew sort of curates the Hal display at the Museum of Music or something like that in Phoenix. And I think there's some of Hal's drums are there. So it's possible that went into his hands, a guy named Michael Kravitz. Hopefully that's in his hands. But anyway, and hopefully they left that'd be cool. I should go see it one day and see if they left that on there. That'd be cool.
That's beautiful.
That's me on Hal's plaque.
That's beautiful. And it's a beautiful album too. I love that live album. It's such a pleasure to listen to. And it's well, anyway, I love that. That's really cool. That's really, really cool.
That was, Hal was maybe, John Denver was maybe Hal's favorite artist that he liked to play with. And we didn't know that at the time. When my wife bought that album, it was the very last gold album that was left. They had all been sold. That just by happenstance, that was the last one. And it happened to be for his favorite artist. And so that was kind of a double bonus for him, one to have something. I mean, he had, there must have been more than 200 gold albums.
Oh, sure.
And I'm sure he was, entitled to more than that. There were probably a bunch of gold singles and stuff, but I mean, just to have that many is a lot.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And, to only get one back, unfortunately, so it's very sad. And I really thought, that people would step up, and they didn't. I don't know where all those albums went, but they're, I guess, in all different collectors' hands or something like that. And it just, my thought was, get them and give them back to Hal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's very bittersweet.
Yeah. And he is missed. He is missed very much.
Switching gears a little bit here, I wanted to ask you about your book that was released a few years back, Lights, Camera, Accordion, Eye-Popping Photographs of Weird Al Yankovic, 1981 through 2006. This book has done very well. In fact, I understand it's almost completely sold out now. Is that right?
Well, the first book, there are two books.
Yes.
Lights, Camera, Accordion. It was my second book, and that's an all-color book. My first book came out at the end of 2020. And the one good thing about the COVID year was my book was already underway and slated to come out, and you didn't have to go into a store to buy it, so it was great. Yeah. Although you could. That book is essentially sold out. The distributor is out, and just whatever copies reside at Amazon and Barnes and Noble, etc. That's like all that's left.
Got it.
The second book is selling. It's not sold quite as well, and the publisher told me that. He said, just so you know, oftentimes a sequel to follow-up product doesn't do as well as the first one. Just so be prepared, because the first one sold great.
Yeah.
And the second one sold. It's just like, well, it's about half of where the first one was.
Sure.
Which is okay. But very, very proud of both books. And, of course, both issued with Al's permission. I ran all of the photos by him. In fact, anybody that was in the photos, who's close enough to like the band or Al's manager or the engineer in the studio, whatever, anyone who's in the photo, I ran the photos by them and said, is this okay if we publish this? I think Al, literally a handful of photos, like 3 or 4, were like, I'm not a big fan of that one, or maybe not that. But basically, I was able to put out just about everything I want to put out. And there were more than 200 of my black and white photos in there. And that was a very narrow period of time, like 83 through about 86. This is the book, black and white and weird all over. And it was just a narrow period because otherwise I was shooting color film all the time. I rarely shot black and white anymore, but I shot black and white to kind of document certain things. So on a couple of video shoots, like the Eat It video shoot, Ricky, I Love Rocky Road, those are all in there, and they're in black and white. And most of those photos had never been seen before because they weren't ever printed. I just had contact sheets, and they were never distributed or handed out. So, I mean, I had photos that Al had never seen, and, photos I hadn't seen in 35 plus years, and the fans hadn't seen. I mean, there were a handful of photos that we did print, But more than that, there was a ton of other behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. That book did very well. It was very well received by the fans. Enjoyed that book very much. Al wrote the foreword for that book. Which
nice.
Very, very kind of him. So he was behind it 100%. It was great. I gave him a copy. And and then the second book came up very quickly. It was released just 2 years later at the end of 2022. That involved a much wider period of time because I had shot colored film from like the second time I ever saw Al in my life. I had a camera in my hand. So I took pictures and never let it go until finally, I started shooting digital in the late 90s and had a film camera with me less and less and less. So, and it's all from film. It's very heavy from 83 through about 99, 2000. And then it kind of just dribbles out after that because I just, I was shooting more digital. And this book wasn't about that. It was about these other photos, and a lot of which had been seen. They had been come from prints that had been scanned and put on the web, except they were put on at a time. I started Al's website back in 1995.
Was that the Bermuda Files?
That was the Bermuda Files, and then it became WeirdAl.com just a couple of years later. And those photos were scanned and put up with two things in mind. One, a screen was only 640 by 480 pixels, maybe 800 by 600.
Yes.
If you have
the early days of the internet, kids, we could only do what we could do at the time.
Well, right. You have a 320 by 240 pixel photo, and that takes up a quarter of your screen. That was pretty big.
We were not doing 4K back then. It was a different time.
Yeah. Now it's like a postage stamp. Now it's a useless image, except when you scan the original negatives and you put them out in nice printed form, now you're seeing those kind of things properly color corrected, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're seeing them as clean as they could possibly be.
And these photos are scanned like you said, from the original negatives, 35 millimeter film. So this is really high quality presentation of these photos that you've had for years.
Well, no, because I scanned them myself, so it's only so good.
Yeah.
But, no, I worked for more than 4 months every day in 2021.
Oh my God.
Every single day I scanned film.
I love it.
And it was like 400 plus rolls. And from that point, then I went through and I selected the Al stuff, ran a bunch. I got down to like 800 photos, and I knew I was going to need about 300 for this second book.
Okay.
And I was really hoping that if I ran them all by Al, that he would pick out a few hundred that he didn't like.
Okay.
And he picked out 5 out of 800.
Oh, no.
Which I looked at him and I thought, I don't know why you picked those, but whatever. You couldn't have picked 100. You couldn't have helped me out. And I ran them by all the other guys, said, nope, they're all good. So I had a heck of a time narrowing it down.
That's a lot of work.
And I think I got it narrowed down to like 700. And then I sent them all to the publisher. I said, these are all good with me. You get, have your editor.
You pick them.
Who his editor and wife are Al fans. So they have a really good eye, not as, much more objective eye than I do, because these are all my photos.
Sure.
And they narrowed it down to like 300 some odd photos. And so I don't think there was anything that was pulled out that, I regret them pulling. I was very happy with their choices. So they helped a lot on that book. And very, very proud of that book. I love that book, and it's very well received. Fans loved it. Al was very cool with the first book. We brought it on tour in 2022. Now, this was just leading up to the release of the second book.
Yeah.
But we had the first book, and he sold it at the merch table.
Oh, nice.
And we would sell 40, 50 copies a night.
Wow.
And the very last, in fact, at Carnegie Hall, the publisher sent, and this was October 29th or 30th, something like that. And the book was due to come out like literally 2 or 3 weeks later. Yeah. So, of course, there was a stash of books already, to deliver. He sent like 25 books just for fun to go on the merch table.
Yeah.
And not one of them sold.
What?
I don't know. And we had already run out of the other book. We had sold out.
Yeah.
They were gone by early October. They were, so we didn't have any more to sell. So all of a sudden, this new colored book shows up at Carnegie Hall in this beautiful separate room that was designed for merch.
Yeah.
And not one copy sold.
Isn't that weird?
Which was really strange.
That's bizarre.
I don't know if they didn't know what it was, or it was just really weird, really odd. So I don't know if we're going to sell the remaining books on this upcoming tour or not. We'll see. I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind.
Well, it's great for the fans too, because not only are they getting to come see you guys at the show, but like these books also give them a very personal glimpse into your lives over the years and your time together. So it's great for you. It's great for Al, and it's great for the fans too.
Well, definitely.
So, in other words, this is a collector's item. If you want a copy, get on the ball, sports fans. This summer is the time to get it.
It could be. Hopefully they'll be out there. I don't know. Again, I probably won't find that out till the first gig. I'll go out to the merch table and see what everything looks like, and then if I see the book there, or if I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah. To give fans a taste of the kind of memories that are preserved in this book, I was wondering if I could trouble you to share the story about one particular image in the book. I think it's in the second book, around Al shaving his mustache for the Ricky video. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Oh, yeah. He was shaving his mustache for the Ricky video.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Pretty much what I wrote in the description. Well, first off, Al's level of shave. I mean, I was in a bathroom with him when he's shaving, snapping away, so that tells you something about both me and Al, I think.
We don't judge.
He was very permissive, very tolerant of me always being around with, but again, a lot of times he got to use some of the cool photos that I got, because it's not like he was hiring an on-set photographer.
Sure.
So, and everyone else who was there, and I'm running around taking all sorts of, because I'm not in the video that much. So I'm just kind of standing around. So there's a lot of behind the scenes photos, and nobody ever questioned me because, one, they know I'm like I'm part of the talent or whatever.
Yeah.
And two, and they didn't question why I was doing that. It was just like, well, if it's okay with Al and his manager, but it must be okay. And I took all sorts of pictures of everything. And again, that's what fueled the website.
Yeah.
That's what fueled, these two books. That's what fueled a lot of photos that Al has used for different publicity purposes. That's what fueled in the squeeze box, that 122-page books. That's my book.
Yeah.
Most of those photos are mine.
Yeah.
Now, that's pre-scanning them. I wish I could go back and do those all over again. Those were all taken from prints, and I not the artist, but they were all taken from like 4x6 or 3.5 by 5, photographs.
Yeah.
In whatever density existed at the time. I rescanned all of them. Two of the guys from Legacy, which was a branch of Sony Music, came over to my house on a couple of occasions. We went through all the photos. We went through the entire archive and pulled out stuff. And I went through and I rescanned all of those photos. I very meticulously touched them up in ways that I didn't know how to do back in the 90s.
Sure.
When I put a lot of them online. And so that's another benefit of me being let loose with the camera. And again, I'm in this little bathroom, basically a guest bathroom while he's shaving so that he could become, Ricky Ricardo, sans mustache.
Yeah, thank you. I should have clarified this. When Weird Al fans know exactly what I'm talking about, but for those of you listening who don't, this is a music video for a song called Ricky, which was a parody of the song Mickey. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so that you know what I'm talking about. And so Ricky referring to Ricky Ricardo and I Love Lucy. And so Al had to shave his mustache to look like Ricky Ricardo. I should have, if I was a professional, I would have set that up before I asked you to tell the story. But yeah, that's why he's in the bathroom doing what he's doing.
Right. Now, it's also interesting, and I don't know why after 45 years this just occurred to me. I believe that's the only video, one of his videos, that he shaved off his mustache for when it was required. He didn't do it for Gump. He didn't do it for Fat. He didn't do it for any other videos where, he was portraying the original artist or whoever it is who didn't have a mustache. He kept the mustache.
Yeah.
And that that wasn't such a gag to be Ricky Ricardo with a mustache. It was more important to really look like Ricky as much as he could. So didn't wear the glasses, shaved off the mustache. And of course it grew back. I mean,
yeah.
But it occurs to me, and I'm looking at a picture on my wall of us doing the Gump video, and he's got the bald cap on.
Right.
And the mustache and the glasses.
Yeah.
Which, what's his name from, I can't think of his name from Presidents of the United States, but we know him. He didn't have a mustache. He didn't have glasses. That's the only video I can think of where Al went all the way and took because the mustache is such a trademark thing with him, as was the glasses, as was the curly hair. So when you see people imitating Weird Al, even now, even though it's 25 years later since he got LASIK surgery, he doesn't need the glasses, grew his hair straighter.
Yeah.
When they imitate him, they put on the Hawaiian shirt.
Of course.
They do 80s, / 90s Al.
Of course.
And glasses. And nobody really goes around trying to imitate him just, sans glasses and mustache or not.
Right.
And the long they all go harken back to that original thing.
Well, it was an iconic look. I mean, it was such a signature comedy look.
Well, exactly. exactly. When his hair finally goes gray, when he lets people see that it's gone gray, you're not going to find fans out there doing gray Al Yankovic.
No.
That's not going to happen.
It'll be Michael Jackson suit and the curly hair and the wide rim glasses.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, but that's made that his look too. That made Fat what it was.
Yeah.
To have Al look like Al and not necessarily like Michael.
Yeah.
Michael wasn't really that big anyway. So there were certain liberties. It's interesting that it was more important to really sort of look like he was a Ricky Ricardo type for that video. That's had just occurred to me. But again, Al let me take pictures of all sorts of stuff. Not only sort of publicly, but if he was over at my apartment doing something, I got pictures of him just hanging around the apartment doing stuff. It's just because I always had a camera.
Yeah.
And that's just what I did. I took pictures and nobody ever questioned it. Nobody ever said, no, don't, enough with the camera already. They just let me in. Finally, I put them out in a couple of books, and each of those people, I gave them all a book. So here's your book. Shut up.
Well, and and thank goodness you did, because you've preserved these memories that fans would otherwise never have an opportunity to see. I mean, they're getting a glimpse into your creative lives as artists that's very unique to these two book projects. And so I know a lot of your fans are very grateful that you have preserved these memories as meticulous as you have, because I think it's a real gift to the fandom.
That's kind of why I did that. I didn't do it because, you publish a book, you make a bunch of money. That wasn't.
You don't.
You don't.
To say from experience, you don't.
It's a labor of love, and it was something very cool. And it was a way, and particularly with the first book, it was a way to put stuff out there that the fans just hadn't seen. I wasn't really rehashing anything. It was basically brand new, even though it was, 27 years old or 37, whatever. It was new to them. And then the second book came about because, if they like seeing things they hadn't seen before, maybe they'll like to see a bunch of color photos, and then I, went through. I personally scanned all of those with that in mind, and a bunch of other rolls of films that were non-Al, of course, cataloged everything. I can go right to the file based on different keywords, whatever, dogs, cars, different places I lived, jobs, whatever band I was in, etc. All had specific, I can group those and find those specific photos. So once I had them all in this incredible database, I was able to pull out just all the Al stuff and then narrow it down from there, and then go through and start looking at things. I was smart this time. The very first time, and again, these were black and white, I retouched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos, not knowing which ones I was going to pick. So there's a bunch of photos that are ready to go and look great that didn't get used, took up a lot of time.
Yeah.
This time, I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait until I find out what 300 or so photos are going to use, and then I'll retouch those instead of doctoring 850 photos. Because now it's color, so you got density, you got color. There's a little more to it than just sort of dark and light, and
of course
that's black and white, and that's it. But I'm very glad that the fans enjoyed those books.
Well, Lights, Camera, Accordion, eye-popping photographs of Weird Al Yankovic, 1981 to 2006, is available wherever books are sold, for now at least, and possibly maybe this summer on the tour. Keep your eyes peeled if you see it. John, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. And I just want to say, on a personal note, you and the band have always been you've been so generous with me over the years, and all of you guys have been really generous with the fans. And I want folks to know you guys are always go out of your way to connect with fans in this way. And I appreciate it, and I know all of your fans appreciate it. So thank you for everything.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
That's going to do it, friends. That's just about going to wrap it up for this episode of Don't Encourage This. My thanks once again to the great, the legendary John Bermuda Schwartz for joining us on the program. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this, you can smash that like and subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, wherever you like to get the thing out of the thing. And of course, don't forget YouTube. If you'd like to contact the program, you can drop us a line at don'tencouragethis@gmail.com. From Oxford, Ohio, I'm Mark Von Bullock. Thanks again, y'all.